and welcome to this episode of the Zoom Room Sessions as part of our Thriving Tribe. I'm David Francis Moore, and this is my colleague,
Juliet.
And today we are joined by Jessica and Mccann Kennedy of Junk Ensemble. Junk Ensemble is a Dublin-based company that exists to engage diverse audiences in the presentation of brave and imaginative and accessible theatre work, dance theatre work that sheds light on important human issues of the day. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's the gamble there. So I suppose that's changed throughout my career. Currently, I would say I'm a choreographer. I'm also a dance artist and a performer. And I suppose an artist in many ways, but at the minute we're choreographers and co-producers, co-directors of Junk Ensemble. So I suppose that how you see yourself or view yourself really does change depending on the work that you're doing at that time. But that's definitely the direction that I've been going over the past years. And another sort of feather to the cap is curating and programming. We were Cork artists, dance artists in residence for the past 3 years. It's only just culminated now, and so we are curating and programming a series of events as well as performance events and masterclasses, workshops. So I suppose it is quite a large range. But ultimately, yeah, it would be choreographer and director.
Excellent. Jessica?
Yeah, just to add to that, we also teach. So there would be that element of teaching professional classes, but also workshops with younger people, and that would integrate into our own creation of work. We often work with local groups or community groups, whether young people or adult groups, choirs. It's quite a large range, and through that process there's a lot of collaboration and devising with those groups. So we work with them and they input into the actual production or sometimes just the research, but I suppose that is a process in itself, as a professional, that skill that we just have been learning through the years. The motivation, I think, is making work. We have this, I suppose I can't really speak for Meg, but I think it's for the both of us, a creative urge to create. And alongside that, obviously, does come a lot of the producing and the direction, artistic direction, and the organization to foundation, to sort of make the foundations of the work. But the urge comes from a will to create and a will to make art, and I think it would be made someplace else if it wasn't through dance. It's just, I think it just has to come out of me.
Mccann?
I think our motivation lies in telling stories through movement. So the reason why we set up the company and started creating work was because we had something to say, and we needed audiences in order to tell that story. So often you have this conversation of, like, do you need an audience there? And, do you need a large audiences? Do you need, does your work need to be populist in order to fill bums on seats? And I think throughout our Junk Ensemble's sort of pathway, we've really discerned that the work we make, it doesn't matter how many are in the audience, but it does need someone there. So we're really interested in creating site work that each audience member gets their own individual experience and own individual environment with performers that are quite intimate and very close to them at times, and then quite far. we make work that's in the theatre also, and overall we try to tell our story. So we're often giving voices to those that don't have voices, or using text and song. But ultimately, it's the movement and the emotion of the dance that we try and create in the rehearsal room, and then give that experience to the audience.
And alongside that, it's also posing questions. So we have a lot of questions, and that we put those into the work, and we often don't answer them. It's more about just throwing the questions up, and they're sort of there in the space, and the audience are there to think about them and perhaps make their own judgment. But we often don't try to say one thing. There's a couple meanings in there, so that we want the audience to be able to interpret it for themselves. About how the audience will view it, particularly sight work. But in terms of how it connects, it has to connect with us, and we have to be able to read it and understand it. And once we can, and once we do, then we know that others will. And it's just a firm belief. And if they don't, they don't. But we just have this belief that this work resonates now. I can understand this is sort of, there's something in here, there's an emotion I'm pulling out, whatever it is. Then if we believe it, then I believe that others will. And that does sound sort of cheesy, but there's so many times where in rehearsals, I'm not believing it, where it kind of goes, it's not there, or that just doesn't feel right, or it doesn't look right, or it's just sort of, there's something sort of almost superficial about it. So then it's about really pulling in and working and kind of persevering on whatever that section is to make it resonate.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I do believe when we're making work in the studio, although the audience are in the periphery of our minds, it's very much focused on the creation of the work and whether it resonates with us. And you can tell quite quickly. So we would bring a number of choreographic and movement tasks into the studio, including text and images. And when we try those out, and sometimes they just don't work, and sometimes we persevere through the ones that possibly don't work, and they end up working. So there is something for the fact that once we're in that space together, you do have to forget about what people are going to say about it. It really has to speak to us as the choreographer, directors, and creators, essentially. But then as soon as we start thinking about bringing it into this space, and as soon as we start talking about the design, which is at a very early stage, whether it's in the theatre or in sight work, then the audience are immediately considered, and that doesn't stop. So, it's really important that they get the experience that we have chosen for them in some ways, but also that they can go on their own path with that. Where they're positioned, particularly in sight work, or where they're taken, or which performer draws them to which area.
And in the studio, it's really sort of a belief in the process rather than the product, because if you think of the product, it can get quite scary. So it's instead coming in and going, because we start from scratch. We have sets of movement tasks, and we have loads and loads of ideas, but in terms of creating the work, it's about creating it there in the studio. And so a belief that that will just keep building, and it'll go to where it goes, rather than it has to look this way, and it has to be this way, which is it's kind of frightening to start something like that when you're already thinking of how it has to look. Always engage a PR person and a marketing person, and that's really important. If there's really no point in making the work if no one's going to see it, and so we have to at least let people know about it. Then they make up their own minds if they come or not. And so we would spend money on advertising, and that's money very well spent. And they would, so the PR person would get as much press and kind of publicity as possible, and marketing would be billboards, or if we have that budget, and then anything over social media. And
there was a study done actually between billboards, you know, there's massive ones in town, and online and digital marketing, and it was actually proven that digital was more effective. But it's just so cool seeing your poster up in like really large, that in some ways I'm always like, I always push for that. We don't always do it, but it's just kind of cool, you know, to see that.
It's
like,
great to have the physical version left, though.
Yeah.
To have a physical flyer, you know, something that you can hold and keep. And I know people that they put flyers all over their rooms. And Dennis Clossy, the composer we have, I've seen his room, his recording studio, has all the flyers and posters of all the things he's worked on. And there's loads of ours in there, like 20 or something. And it's lovely to see it on a wall.
Yeah, and I think the crux of, or maybe the genesis of where we begin with marketing is imagery. So photography is incredibly important to us, and we spend a lot of money on it. And the main image that we choose, we know is the one that's going to be selling. So we spend a long time working on our photo shoots. They're often ahead of the time we've got into rehearsal rooms. So we really have to think about what this piece can encompass in one image, what we want to say, and how we're going to do that. And we work with two photographers, Fiona Mccann and Trafarelli. And Fiona Mccann usually does do our promotional work. He really understands our vision for trying to get an image out that before the show is made, to really, first of all, attract people's attention, make them really interested and intrigued, and also just think, I really want to see that, you know, I really want to go and book my ticket now.
That's
I think
well spent too, because if the image is good enough, then it can get on the front of a festival program, or it can become sort of the image to then represent a venue or a festival, which instantly will increase hopefully our audience-ship or viewership.
And promo trailers, which we work with Luca Trafarelli on, we spend a lot of time and a lot of money on that. They're always like little mini films, and they do attract a wide viewership for the work that we make. And the one we did with for Dolores, which was in 2018, we worked with actor Michael Murphy and performance artist Amanda Coogan and two other dance performers. The little film that we did with that, for that, just it reached such a wide range. I mean, we literally sold out so quickly with that show, and I think a lot of it was to do with the imagery and the video.
Funny, because as Meg said, we would often do the photo shoots in advance. Of course, they have to be mostly done in advance of the creation of the work. And Soldier Still, one of the shows we did, which was looking at soldiers and looking at violence of war, we sort of just came up with loads of ideas, and the set designer came along, and we tried loads of different things, and she was really inspired by the stuff that we were, you know, seemingly almost random things. They weren't really, but and we kept going back to those images to then speak about the actual set design. And that's happened a couple times, where you kind of, because you have a visual reference as you're sort of devising, you kind of look back and go, yeah, so this sort of makes sense. I think the most important space for us is the studio. That's where we would spend the most amount of time in terms of the creation of work, whether that's through an initial residency that would be between myself and Megan, and sometimes one of the visual designers or one of the designers We might do a residency just to sort of devise and research a week in advance, but then we'll have 6 or 7 weeks in the studio, and that's just sort of amazing, safe space and time to just work through this process of this piece, and just it's a discovery time, and it's really like it's really kind of an amazing feeling going up and getting in and going into work into that space every day, and just coming up with new things, and I just love it. It's a really special time, and we'd only really be doing it 2 or 3 times a year. So it's kind of this like coveted time. So that would be number 1 space. Number 2 space would probably be the performance space, which is the whether it's theatre or a site piece. We prefer doing site work. It's just comes with its own challenges, but site work is just amazing to do because each space is different, and it informs the work then. So we would have more time in the space if we're doing it outside of a theatre. Then we would sort of try and live there as much as we can and rehearse in there, and just get the feel of what kind of vibe or history or resonances that the walls are giving us, and work through that.
The initial time that we have between just Jessica and I, we would either have a residency outside of Dublin, so we have a good relationship with a dance city in Newcastle, dance base in Edinburgh, and it's always quite important to leave our own spaces and go somewhere else, and just have this consolidated time where we do quite a lot of research, and that's when we begin creating our list of tasks to bring into the studio. Sometimes it's just in our own homes that we do that, or in offices or something like that. But I think for us going into a studio, even if we don't plan on moving a huge amount, and just getting into the gear, it's like putting on your work clothes. You get out your notebooks, you sit on the floor, you do your exercises. It just puts you in a completely different headspace than just sitting at a desk, for instance. It puts you in the headspace of working with live bodies, which we will do soon, and then we're in the studio, as Jessica has just alluded to. And then I think another important notion to mention is when this performance space, whether it's in the theatre or a site, it's been so many things. It's had so much history going through it. Maybe last year or last week even, Medea was there, and then next week, As You Like It will be there. So I think it's really important to create that performance space like your living room. And it takes time to do that, and for the performers to feel as if they're just sitting back, lounging on their couch or sitting at the table, so that they have onus over the space. They're inviting the audience to come and see them, that they have control, but also just they have a real license to be there. And it's the same when you're in different sites as well. You really need to spend as much time there in order to really envelope the space, but also just feel as if you can invite someone in, come into my party and sit down and have a drink. Absolutely, I do. I think it's, for want of a better word, insidious in the arts culture, that the two have to exist side by side. I think in some, I'm going to retract a little bit, because I think there's some visual art areas where perhaps it isn't necessary. But I think when it's about performance and performing in front of a group of people, I think, yes, that the two things do go hand in hand, and they need each other to a certain degree. If we were just creating on our own in our bedrooms and performing to no one, then I don't think so. But the fact that we need to share our work to sort of the greater eye and the greater public, particularly in dance, everyone says it's a hard sell. I think it's changing in certain ways, but everyone's gone to a really bad dance show and never gone back again, or has a friend that's done that. So we're kind of still like, you know, backtracking in certain ways, trying to grab those people again. And actually, dance isn't like that. It can be loads and loads of other things. And I think you need to be entrepreneurial in order to bring those people with you, or to go those certain pathways.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly gone to a bad theatre show, so I still go back. But yeah, I think if you're producing, you're an entrepreneur. So but through that you create work, but if you're putting it out there, then you have to be an entrepreneur, and you have to come up with ways that suit the work and that will suit your viewership, and ways to get them in. And you have to think outside the box and be as original as one can within that framework. And the more outside of the box you think, I think the more successful you might be in terms of garnering new audiences. Work, then even as a choreographer, it almost goes hand in hand. I think you learn along the way. I mean, we just learned as we went along the way. We applied for lots of different things that were wrong. Loads of different applications that we weren't applicable for anyway. But we just sort of, we had a lot of advice. We had help from Project Art Centre. They helped us as associate artists in 2007. They gave us our first commission before the Arts Council even funded us. But we went to Willie White, who's the artistic director then, with an idea and said, what do you think? And he liked it and supported us from there. So I suppose you do have to, you have to be ready to approach people. But I mean, if you don't ask, you don't get. And that's kind of what we go for, is just ask for more, show ideas, speak about ideas, and just go to all different pots and see what comes out. Because I think people are looking for that anyway. They're looking to be inspired, and they're looking for new ideas to support.
Yeah. Megan?
I think it's coming up with ideas that that are maybe a little wacky, or maybe a little outside your comfort zone, and working with those ideas, and then presenting them to people, so as many people as possible. So that includes funders, partners, organizations, venues, whatever it is, in whatever way that you manifest your work. I think it's, as Jessica said, you talk to as many people as possible, but it's also trying to get them on board with you. So rather than kind of shoot an idea at someone and say, so you're going to fund me, it's more like, I have this thought, and I thought that maybe we could work together to become partners on this, and is there anything that you can bring to this that, you know, that it can be mutually benefit to both of us, to both organizations, or both, you know, ultimately we need funding in order to put the work on. But I think rather than kind of say, just give me the money and I do the work, it's really interesting for organizations or individuals to be part of that process, not necessarily have artistic license, but, you know, to be there from an early stage, developing the work and seeing a work in progress and being able to feed in and give their thoughts. And we all like being part of something from the bottom, from the ground up, and including producers. You know, our own producer would say the same thing, just to kind of bring her in to do the deed. It's not satisfying for her, and for probably a lot of producers. Whereas if you're working from the application point of view all the way up into production, and you're doing residencies, and you're engaging with doing lots of ancillary activities with communities and things like that, I just think then you have a much better opportunity for people to really want to support the work.
think it's a longer process as well, and sort of realizing that it's about establishing relationships, and that would go particularly with say partners or international partners, festivals, these kinds of things. So it's about starting a relationship, meeting them, starting a relationship, talking about your work, rather than this is our work, please buy it. It's just about sort of letting people into the process, and it is actually, I think it has to be sort of there has to be some sort of mutual like as well for the relationship to be able to continue. So we've had ongoing talks and dialogues with international festivals or partners, and it's also it's for them finding the right work. It's the work that speaks to them, but we're okay just to kind of continue on that dialogue.
All of them.
All of them. What was the one about sustainability?
The ethical and sustainable thinking.
Ethical and sustainable thinking.
I mean,
think that would be one of the ones that not ethical. I think that ethical thinking is there in our work, but sustainability, it takes a while to get to a point where you go, how am I going to sustain myself in this field? And then so that would be the one that I think you kind of learn through experience. I mean, you learn all of them through experience, but I think you just sort of get dumped in, and all of those, absolutely all of those that you listed, are just sort of part of the process of creating work. We kind of have had a company as we do, but sustainability is something that you don't think about when you start making work, because you do stuff for free, and it's also, it's for the love, but it's also for the growth of the company or of oneself as an artist. But it's a really important one to learn. I mean, the other for free, and to not sell our work short.
The other way to look at sustainability, which I think is probably how it's framed in this question, is like environmentally friendly work, or work that helps the ecology and the environment. And I think most live theatre and dance doesn't. I think as conscious as we try to be, you basically buy a whole load of stuff, throw it in the theatre, and then throw it away again. We try and recycle as much as possible, but generally speaking, it's, everything's there for a very short period of time, and then it's taken down again. So yeah, and then we fly so often, and you bring all your artists from, if you're working with international artists, you bring them all over. They generally need to fly. So I think that one, as Jessica said, in a different sort of frame, but that one isn't necessarily something in our way of working yet. But the ones that really resonated with me was the risk and the ambition and the perseverance. That starts from a very early age of creating work, and I think it really, having those qualities really pushes the individual or the company to making the work that they really want and finding a way of making it, because it's quite easy just to give up. And I think there's a lot of, there isn't enough space for all of us. And in some ways it's an easy way out, or in other ways it's the only way. It's survival of the fittest. It's the only way that actually some individuals and companies are going to continue to make work. But they all resonate.
There is enough space for all of us, but it's about finding one's own space. So it's about sort of architecting space into and making a whole for oneself, or a circle, and rather than all going for one big triangle. So the ambiguity or the sort of uncertainty you kind of have that as I trained as a dancer, so you kind of already have that. Once your degree finishes, there's always uncertainty, and it's just something that goes alongside with the work, and it goes alongside with what we do, unfortunately. However, there is just this sort of innate belief that things will happen and something will come along, and it does sound it can sound frivolous, but it always does. So it's also just having that belief and knowing that the work you do is good and that you will get more. I think maybe going through the internships and placements, which I know happen in secondary school, but I think they would be they'd be almost more valid to happen within higher education, where it can set you out and really work with, and I know they happen anyway, but really kind of immerse into maybe even longer than a week, which it often is, immerse into what the field that you're interested in.
I would see if there could be a stipend that's associated to that internship or apprenticeship, so that that person, that individual, can continue to exist whilst working in that area, and then maybe it's for a year long. So similar to, say, apprenticeships with carpenters or stonemasonries, you know, they actually do get a fee for that. So whether it's part of full time and you have to, you know, get another sort of job, I think it's the only way to fully understand the job in which you will fall into is by being part of it for longer than a year, because it's just so easy to plonk yourself into it and think that things are going to fall into your lap, and it just doesn't work that way.
I think by giving a stipend, you're placing value on that person and on their input and on even their potential learning. So because ultimately it's going to all help within the cycle. So the more people coming into our field, the better it is for us. So the more people we can help to come into that and give them sort of an ownership over that, and that often does have to relate to sort of financial, some sort of financial benefit, but then they feel that they can give back something. And I don't think belief is a skill, but it's sort of but it is a very important thing to sort of start out with, a belief in oneself and one's work, and a confidence with that. I think collaboration would probably be the biggest one, and that is knowing or sort of learning as you go, but that the people around you and the people that you're working with have so many amazing thoughts and ideas and contributions, and the more people that are sort of part of that process, the more of the right people that are part of that process, then the better the work can be. So it's about listening and creating with others.
Yeah, so confidence was definitely one of mine. Some would say you can't learn confidence. I think you can, and I think it's a certain way that you can learn it. No, you wouldn't want it to be false confidence, but I think it's a way of presenting yourself and presenting your idea, and having the belief or confidence around that, so that people really listen. And then sociability, I think, is a skill that you can definitely learn and work on. So that relates to what Jessica was saying about collaboration. Relationships with people is so important from the very beginning. And also just being able to work beside each other and knowing when to step down and when to really allow that person to, or that idea to take precedence over yours, and not really think that's my idea, not be too precious about it, but really think of it as a team, as a working group. And the third one would be positivity. I think it's really the only attitude to have in the arts sector, and I think that you need to be positive about yourself as well. I know this sounds like a self-help video right now, but I think you know what I mean.
I think it's also very important to be able to articulate on paper or through voice what the idea is. So I suppose articulation of ideas, and that means being able to pitch them, and whether that is through a funding application or to a person that you just might be interested in your idea, but to let people into that idea through a sort of refined, condensed 3 sentences or whatever it is, or a larger application that people can get an idea of the ambition. And I think it has to be a sort of energy or excitement about the project that's sort of palpable from either how you speak about it or how you can write about it.
That's how I consider myself as an arts professional. You know, all of those things that I listed off, that's what sustains me. So because I can't be a choreographer, director for all the time with Junk Ensemble, you know, we do 2 or 3 productions per year. So there's all those other things that we need there's all those other things that I can do to sustain myself. And you do have to really, you know, have an eye on where the next job is going to be. And that really ties into, I think, this whole conversation about entrepreneurship. Like you just have to be an entrepreneur of yourself. Otherwise, you won't be able to sustain living in the arts. And you just have to always be thinking of the next thing and what else you can be doing, which is why so many artists burn out. Because it's exhausting at times. But I think it's a way of managing it, and managing these different facets so that you're not compromising one for the other, but that you can sustain your living in the arts. When people say, "Do you love what you do?" I can honestly say yes. I think that is probably the most fulfilling thing, that to know that what I'm doing is really what I want to do. And I know a lot of people can't say the same, so I feel fortunate in that. However, I wouldn't say that I'm fortunate being an artist, because it takes so much work and so much time and so much belief and creativity to get where we are. But I think the fact that I couldn't do anything but this is one of the most fulfilling things.
Jessica?
It's a constant learning. As each project you go through, and whether it's your own project or whether it's invited on to work on someone else's, you learn about those ideas that you might not ever even have heard about. So you're kind of constantly learning or researching new ideas, or kind of learning about new events and meeting new people alongside that. So that's it's kind of always feels like it's always evolving, always growing. So that's an exciting thing to know. I mean, I like that I don't know what I'm going to do next year, because there's sort of that prospect of not quite a blank canvas, but all the different ideas and people that can come through.
Find out more about upcoming events that you have, and your website and details about your work. Where can they find that information, and what is it?
So our website is www.junkensemble.com. We have just created a film called Fallow Table. It's currently not online as we're applying for film festivals, but it was created during lockdown as commissioned by Project Art Centre for Future Forecasts, a collaboration with Luca Trafarelli. So you can watch out on our website for that.
And we have 2 upcoming shows. One is called The Veiled Ones, which is a commission with the Barbaro International Children's Festival, which is based in Galway, and it's a piece looking at witches, piece for young children. And another piece called The Misunderstanding of Mirror, which previewed in Bray in Mermaid Art Centre last February. And that's working with visual artist Alice Marr. It's a solo dance piece, and looking at the myth of Mirror, so of its myth of Mirror.
Brilliant.
And
And listen,
that will be performed in May of 2021.